Ooh, red and blue states. Now, if you don't quite understand what the title's about, it's pretty much referring to Republic, right wings and left wing. In Tasmania, but I'm not going to add in more. You know, obviously you have the One Nation, standing, Peter Dutton, and it's completely, and where Queensland is, regards to religion, again, it's like 46 or something around there. And comparison to Victoria, it's based on Queenslanders. This is where it's all the tropic, the Great Barrier Reef, and there's often every single year, and it is gone to the, it's ongoing. When you have every single year, regardless if cyclone, flooding, drought, I don't know about drought, but it damaged a lot of goods. It creates a sense of tight community, right? Now, when I went to online and check out why Queensland is different, and as they talk about colonization, they talk about mining, they talk about this and that, but I'm just talking about the true facts about Queensland. It's one of the humid and hottest areas, especially up northern Queensland as well. It's very, very hot up there, and people up there generally lives a lot more humid, a lot more hotter than southern states. Also, you got Darwin, South Northern Territory is also copped as well, but I'm not going to speak much about it. But let's talk more of this. So, you got this, right? Very, very strong, and the fact that knowing you got weathers like that in comparison to Melbourne. Melbourne doesn't get much 30 degrees in a year, like 35, mid 30s, or even 40 degrees. We classify 32 as a very hot day, and we tend to be a lot more European weather type, more like cloudy, rainy, cold, windy, that sort of weather. So there's a huge contrast with them two different states. Now you have them two different states, and also you also have to look at the first fleet of people. When the first fleet of convicts came to Australia, majority of them went to, which is under Arthur Phillip, went to New South Wales. Now, back in the time where states hasn't combined, Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria was combined into one New South Wales, right? Or Southern Cross. But it wasn't that very strong. But majority of the settlers moved into the New South Wales, right? Sydney. Then you have the second and third and fourth. The second fleet is more of the ladies, right? They get impregnated in the UK, right? Now, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, eighth fleet, and the European fleets, right? They usually paid money, right, to come to and start a new life, to go to Australia. And usually those who are coming from, whether it's labor shortage or perhaps educated people. Now, obviously, those who came to Melbourne are usually not as large numbers of convicts. It's more of the numbers of the educated people, or perhaps what my teachers love to talk about is the £10 joke, which means that they cost them £10 to come to Australia during that time, and which they like to refer to a lot of politicians or people up in the hierarchy, patriarchal environment, or privileged £10 joke. born with a silver spoon. All right, that's what the teachers like to say. Now you got that. And also you have to look at, how the laws and things like that. I know Queensland just passed through this year or last year of the abortion where it's not criminalized. Before, the only two states remain very strong on abortion is New South Wales and Queensland, where back then, those are the two states, and Victoria was known as the abortion tourism. I believe it was 28 weeks or 24 weeks abortion. Now, the second highest abortion weeks will be Tasmania. So Victoria is one of them. Then you got Tasmania and you got South Australia. Then, reduced by numbers and things like that. Yada, yada, yada. Now, that tells a lot, right? When a woman goes through abortion, I'm not talking about whether it's taking the pill, vaginal, oral, or vacuum, or getting snipped out bits and pieces. It does create a huge mental, especially more of the vacuum, more of the with the snipping inside the body. It creates a lot more mental health for them. The study has shown, right, and Teddy on medication as well. So that's what I can say. And also, studies has shown that countries who's coming. No, I can't talk about that. But if you look at there's not much huge comparison between Victoria in comparison to European. Europeans are the same weather, and it's always uncomfortable weather. It's very cold. It's very chilly. Very low exposed to sun ray or getting natural vitamin D's. All right, so you have two geographies like that, and you get to see a lot of strong left wing countries or party, very strong, especially with the Europe or the Western society, mainly in Europe as well. Wanting to find justice and things like that. Now, when we talk about the 10-pound joke, or perhaps the educated people come to a new country, they wanted to they're educated, they're more willing to fight for the rights, or they tend to be a lot more literate than amongst the others. They're saying are far above and beyond than comparison to the rest. When you have that, and generation after generation of that, and yes, I know hypergamy or educated people, they don't last long, right? It doesn't last long on 3 generations, even if they do. But somehow it was gone more towards with the social justice, right? And which we have seen a lot, and which is more of, you've seen that Switzerland, you see all these countries out there, Scandinavian countries, and you talk about all of them, those. And they're wanting to find justice and peace, finding more comfort and things like that. Where Queensland is completely different. For them to find comfort is to be tight-knit community, one or the other, because the goal is to build a strong tribe, like neighbors know to each other. Because when it comes to natural disaster, they know they give one or the other help. They share the same struggles and hardship, but they never give up in life. So you have that sort of like a PTSD, or sort of that instant gratification on willing to help, and tend to be more conservative thinking, because when it comes to natural disaster, you lose everything. That's reality. Your house being battered over and over again, but you still get onto your feet and things happen like that. But when it comes to Melbourne, nothing, like, you do have bushfires and droughts, but it's not as common as what we see in Queensland, what they go through, like bushfires and everything. And they go in a mass scale, where Victoria is only some pocket parts, right? So you have that. And even though you have that, trying to find, the laws and the system. What I'm trying to say, there's a lot more educated people who has moved to Victoria and has gone to the stage on buying into social justice and fighting for rights and things like that, or marching on the streets or things like that. This could be the same people that came to Australia from the Europeans or the UK as well. Right-minded people all come together and come aligned to go to Victoria State. Now you have that. There's a lot more laid back. Victoria State has a lot more social services comparison to New South Wales, even though New South Wales has 1 million more population than Victoria. So when you have more social services, that gives you a clue. All right, so you have that. So that is my take on these two countries. Sorry, these two states. Sorry, I can't say countries. These two states and where they're coming from and why they're thinking that way. Because if you look at statistically, when you look at many of the countries on the hot climate countries, majority of them, countries in the equator, close to equator. If you look closely on number one countries, right, they can be conservative, they can be happy people, and they're exposed to vitamin D, they're exposed to sun, whether it's Indonesia, I can't say Philippines, but even along the hot and humid. Even you talk about Ecuador, or you talk about like Peru, or you can talk about like Colombia, whether they're happy, whether they're on drugs or things like that, but you don't see much on news that huge left community. But there is, unfortunately, if there's related to drugs, then obviously there's gangs and power and things like that will get involved. But I'm not going to talk about that. But if you look at colder climate countries like the Europeans, you see a completely different side. Now, obviously, if you talk about Middle East and Middle East, especially like Afghanistan, like 80% of the geography of the country is surrounded by mountains. It's mountaineers, nomadics, live simple lives, they tend to not to go through that. But what I'm trying to say, those countries are more of a technological, has passed through industrial, are most likely to go towards the left. So that's my take on. And my friend, I know, what triggered for me to talk about this topic is I had this conversation 2 days ago about this topic, and for me to think about it, I'm just trying to still find a bit more, but I think it's all about the history and also talk about the weather and things like that, and what has caused the natural disaster has formed into these states. Anywho, I gotta end this video.